Occasionally, Wheeler notes, on page 193, the heroic or mythical subject is brought to life in the more impressionistic manner of our second category, and at once ceases to be an academic set piece. In describing this painting, we will assume you recognize it and describe it for what it is. Are you ready? The scene is set inside the walls of Troy that loom through the dusty air in the background. The Trojan army ranked against the walls, watches a team of strong men in the center foreground, heaves the wooden horse through the gatehouse to the right foreground. They lean their full weights into the effort. The rhythm is clapped out by a coxswain between them and the horse. Women and children look on by the gatehouse tower. A lone figure, Laocoon perhaps, runs out from the army. His arm is outstretched. Has he just flung the spear? A forlorn figure seated below a dead tree, and ruined column, to the left foreground looks on. Maybe this is Cassandra? She cannot stop the doom that is to come. To the far left foreground, a female figure waits for the horse to pass her. Is this Helen? And above her, on a pillar stands the figure of Minerva, with her trademark helmet, shield and spear. She seems to be directing the horse towards the city to the left, and hovering above the crowd, urging the horse on with her scepter, is Juno or perhaps Neptune. It is clearly a god regardless. Finally, a lone figure in the center foreground, seems ready to run out of the picture at us, flailing his arms wildly, as if to alert us of danger. On page 196, Wheeler notes that, the crowded scene is little more than a sketch, but it vividly displays the episode. This brings us to what Wheeler calls the second stream. On page 193, he notes, that the second stream springs more nearly from the age and environment to which it belongs. To Wheeler's way of thinking, what he calls, the impressionistic, or second stream, is authentically Roman, and its characteristics are as much dependent on the nature of one fresco, as they are on the tastes and sensibilities of the time in which they were painted. The Trojan horse scene from Pompeii is academic certainly. You have to have read Book 2 of the Aeneid to interpret it, or at least know the story of the sack of Troy, but allowing for that, note how the painting is impressionistic. Mood is more important than form. It's all about your impression. The painter didn't care if you'd think the picture was realistic or not. Wheeler zooms in on the team pulling the horse. Wheeler notes on page 196 that, they are leaning their whole weight rhythmically into the effort, and, as the functional center of the scene, the light is focused upon them. They are boldly splashed in with gleaming color, and with the utmost economy of detail, and are contrasted, effectively, by the dimmer static figures of the wandering Trojan army in the background. He goes on to note that, these spectators are nevertheless linked with the protagonists by a single emphatic figure, which running towards the mysterious horse, helps to concentrate attention and coordinate the composition. So, how do we know what style this painting is? It counts as an example of the third, or ornamental style, which lasted from circa 20 BC to the earthquake in AD 62. Painters of the third style treated the walls as blank canvases, as opposed to windows onto a distant space. It was art for art's sake. Second style architectural motifs disappear or drift to the background, such as the walls of Troy that loom in the background. They provided backdrops for narrative scenes, such as the Trojans heaving the wooden horse into their city in this case. Monochrome backgrounds, such as this, also directed our attention towards the action. Wheeler identifies two streams running through third style wall paintings, the academic and impressionistic streams. This painting counts as a transitional piece between them. On the one hand, you have to know the myth, in order to interpret the meaning of this painting. Thus it is academic, but on the other hand, the figures are merely sketched in. The composition is impressionistic. The painter was more interested in capturing the frenzied mood of the scene, rather than presenting picture-perfect likenesses of the various mythical characters. Let's move on to a painting from Herculaneum. In this scene, seated on a throne to the right foreground, we see Dionysus, identified by his trademark thyrsus, a fennel stalk, wound in ivy, held in his left hand, and the cup of wine he holds in his right hand. He leans carelessly back as a female disciple to his left, reaches over to crown him with an ivy garland. Two more devotees wait behind her to the left. They appear to be chatting, and on the far left, we see a small child, or perhaps another worshipper arriving up from the background. How do we know what style it is? It counts as an example of the third, or ornamental style, which lasted from circa 20 BC to the earthquake in AD 62. Painters of the third style treated the walls as blank canvases, as opposed to windows onto a distant space. It was art for art's sake. Second style architectural motifs disappear in the third style. This is a narrative scene. It seems to portray some kind of sacred ritual or mystery. Again in the third style, monochrome backgrounds, such as this one, help to focus our attention on the narrative scene before us. Wheeler identifies two streams running through third-style wall paintings, the academic and impressionistic stream. The academic stream refers to what he thinks is a boring and repetitive tradition that harkens back to ancient Greek art and its focus on mythic iconography, and whilst this scene is certainly mythical, it is also different. This painting belongs to his second, impressionistic stream, because the artist was clearly far more interested in his use of color, than he was in presenting Dionysus and his Maenads in crystal clarity. The figures are merely sketches, with, as Wheeler notes on page 196, unstudied attitudes. In fact, Wheeler likens this scene to the work of the 20th century, Welsh impressionist, Augustus John, who also painted such figures with unstudied attitudes against vivid blue skies. Augustus John never visited Pompeii, and the Roman wall painter certainly never met Augustus John, and so in this way, on page 196, Wheeler says, Pompeii, Rome, as in so much else, is here looking, not backward to Hellenic Greece, but forward, with easy mastery, across and beyond the Middle Ages. What he means by this, is that wall painters in Pompeii, that were swallowed up by a volcano in AD 79, anticipated in their time, a movement in art, that occurred independently and in protest to the orthodox conservatism of the European Dark Ages. If you didn't know that this painting was Pompeian, but viewed it alongside the work of Augustus John in the Impressionist collection in a gallery, would you believe they are unconnected, and separated by 2,000 years? Wheeler cites this painting during his commentary on amphitheaters, specifically in reference to the Pompeian amphitheater, which it portrays. It is unmistakable due to the double staircases supported by gradated arches that lead up to the top row of its cavea. The scene portrays the riots that broke out between local fans of the Pompeian gladiators and those of the nearby town of Nuceria. Not content to enjoy the Munera Games, the crowd joined in. It led to a 10-year senatorial ban on Munera in Pompeii in 59 BC, and therefore counts as the first recorded instance of sport hooliganism in Europe. This painting is also interesting because it displays the Roman artist's habit of sacrificing perspective for the sake of narrative, something that crops up again in Roman relief sculpture. It is third style because it is impressionistic. It's not necessary to paint the figures perfectly. Once you recognize the amphitheater, you get the message. The background is monochrome, again typical of the third style. We therefore focus on the narrative unfolding before our eyes, the art. Wheeler calls this painting a masterpiece of Impressionism, in the caption to illustration 183 on page 198. He notes the vigorous splashes of color of these houses at noon. The figures are sketched in briskly as they hurry to escape the extreme midday sun. The contrast between light and shade is emphatic in this third style painting. The painting is panicked and hurried. The paint is layered on thickly, as if the artist was in a rush. In fact, the painting is similar to the expressionist movement to which Vincent van Gogh or Edvard Munch belong. Heavy brush strokes, suggesting anger or frustration. Roman plebs hurry about town in the midday sun in this case. Have you ever found yourself in the street during siesta in southern Italy? It feels like this. Angry, frustrated, antisocial, and hot.